Moving on to our 20th century philosopher, John Rawls. And the key concept that we'll be discussing that John Rawls introduced is called the veil of ignorance, or the original position. Rawls thought that both the categorical imperative and utilitarianism could lead to human rights violations. Under the categorical imperative, avoiding the lesser evil might lead to a greater evil. And under utilitarianism, well, you could commit all types of crimes as long as you profess that they were for the greater good, right? Rawls said that we should operate under a veil of ignorance, where instead of putting ourselves into a situation and saying, what would we do in this situation? Instead, we should examine a situation without knowing which person we are in the situation. So if you put it in terms of the original trolley problem, in the John Rawls version of the trolley problem, the veil of ignorance would prevent you from knowing if you were the person standing by the switch, one of the people tied to the tracks, or one of the people in the trolley. And then asks, what should happen in this situation? Not knowing which person you are in this situation. So Rawls wanted to create a system that would think about, let's make sets of rules that would create fair situations for everybody involved. In other words, he wanted to take the rules of the categorical imperative and create the best outcomes, just like utilitarianism. So it was the best of both worlds. So he wanted to derive rules from asking what would be fairest to everyone in every situation. So let's go back to our example of stealing food from the supermarket when your family is starving. Instead of saying, my family is starving, so it's right for me to steal food, or it's my supermarket, so therefore it's wrong to steal food, Rawls would ask us to imagine the situation without putting ourselves into the shoes of anybody in the situation. Am I the guy who is shoplifting food? Am I the guy who owns the supermarket? Am I the supermarket's workers? Am I the supermarket's other customers? Am I the shoplifter's family starving at home? What rules can we create which will create the fairest outcome for everybody in that situation? Rawls believed that fair outcomes were more important than equal outcomes. I'm sure you guys have seen this graphic before. The problem is that we have 3 kids who are trying to watch a baseball game, right? And there's a fence that's in the way that's preventing them from watching the baseball game. An equal solution would give each kid a box to stand on. Well, the kid on the left, the tall kid, doesn't need a box, but he gets a box anyway. The kid in the middle needs a box, and the kid on the right, I guess the toddler, the box isn't good enough for him. So that's an equal outcome. It's not a just or fair outcome. In the picture on the right, we see that the kid on the left side didn't get a box because he can already see over the fence. The kid in the middle got 1 box, and the kid on the right, the toddler, got 2 boxes. Now all 3 of them can see over the fence. This is a just or fair outcome. It's not necessarily an equal solution because one kid got more boxes than another kid, but the outcome is fair. All 3 of them can now see over the fence. So what Rawls was struggling with was the division of this argument into deontological and teleological ethics. Let's talk about what those big fancy words mean. Deontological ethics are rule-based ethics, like the categorical imperative. Now, don't get confused. Deontology is not synonymous with the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is just one example of deontological ethics. Teleological ethics are outcome-based. Utilitarianism is just one example of teleological ethics. Teleology is not synonymous with utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is just one category of teleological ethics. There's lots of different examples of deontological ethical systems beyond just the categorical imperative. When your parents say, these are the household rules because I said so, that's deontological ethics. That's rule-based ethics. I set the rules, you follow the rules, that's it. There's also a theological idea called divine command theory which argues that obeying God's will is what creates good in the universe because God's will is necessarily good. If God told you to do it, then it's therefore a good thing, and that's what creates goodness. And then, of course, the categorical imperative, which says not just am I doing what I'm told, but am I living in such a way that I would create a rule that I would want everybody to follow at all times forever. All of these are examples of rule-based ethics. With teleological ethics, outcome-based ethics, there's different types of outcomes that we could all be looking for. We could be looking for maximizing pleasure, like what's best for me, what's best for my pleasure and the pleasure of other people. That's hedonism, right? That is a teleological ethical system. You could look at what creates the best outcome for me, not the most pleasurable outcome, but the best outcome for me. That's objectivism, which centers the outcome for the self. Now, the difference between hedonism and objectivism is that objectivism would argue that, going to the gym for 18 hours a week or studying for 8 years in college or, discipline and labor and all that stuff, that's good for me. Whereas hedonism would say, oh, is it not fun? Then I'm not going to do it, right? Objectivism prioritizes the self. Hedonism prioritizes the self, but hedonism prioritizes pleasure for the self. Whereas objectivism could be about sort of like austere, monk-like self-improvement, which is not the same as pleasure. And then, of course, utilitarianism, which is about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. These are all examples of teleological ethical systems. The problems with deontological or rule-based ethical systems, not just the categorical imperative, but any rule-based ethical system. Let's go through those. In a lot of rule-based ethical systems, the rules don't cover every situation. Let's take religious rules, for example. A lot of the major religions, the major Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, for example, have a lot of rules that their followers are supposed to follow, right? Obey the Sabbath, honor God, honor your parents, don't kill people, don't lie, and so on and so forth. These are all the rules of these religious faiths. But there's a lot of modern dilemmas that these ancient holy texts could not and did not cover. There's questions about bioethics and smartphones and all types of things that these ancient texts could not and did not foresee. So what do we do when the rules don't cover every situation? Well, one thing we do is we just reinterpret other old rules to make room for new rules, right? But there's also things like cloning and space travel and all other types of weird ethical situations that, to be honest, the ancient holy texts don't cover. We saw this with dress code debates. Manuel's dress code in particular was first written in I believe, the 1980s. And one of the things that early dress code said was no spikes on clothes. People don't wear a lot of spikes on clothes nowadays. They did in the 80s. It was a big punk rock thing. Punk rock and metalheads put spikes on their belts and jean jackets and leather jackets and so on and so forth. It's not that big of a deal anymore. There's also stuff in the dress code about bandanas and gang colors and stuff like that. People are not wearing red and blue bandanas on their heads to school. People are not putting up, Crip and Blood set signs in school or wearing those clothes that affiliate or whatever. So the rules are outdated. And what they do is they try to make rules that cover these new situations. But the more complicated the situation becomes, the more rules we invent, and then the rules become impossible to remember and therefore obey because they're so complicated. And you can see this with the law and specific areas of law, such as tax law, right? These laws are so complicated that we have whole areas of specialty where people are paid to understand and interpret these rules because the rules are too complicated for regular people to understand and interpret. There's a reason that your elementary school teachers were told, they said, look, when you make classroom rules, don't put like 29 rules up on the board. No one will be able to remember them. Keep it simple. Make it 3 or 4 or 5. Don't make it any more than that because the kids won't be able to remember all 27 or 28 or 36 of your rules. So this is the problem with rule-based ethics. Now, with a rule like do what I tell you, if that's the ultimate rule, obey authority, that's an easy rule to remember, right? One of the problems with that rule is that sometimes the rules can contradict themselves. Like what if one authority tells you one thing and another authority tells you another thing? Which authority do you obey? Even with a simple rule like obey authority, we find a contradiction. So I'll give you another example of rules that contradict themselves. Let's look at the 10 Commandments. One of the commandments says, honor thy father and mother. And that's widely interpreted to mean obey your parents, right? Honor thy father and mother. Pretty straightforward. Do what your parents tell you. Another commandment says, do not bear false witness. In other words, do not lie. So, let's go back to our grandmother birthday sweater scenario. It's your birthday, your grandmother's there, you open your gift, it is a hand-knitted sweater, it is hideous, it is too small for you, you're never going to wear it, you don't like it, and you have two different rules pressuring you right now, right? One of them says, do not bear false witness. So you're not allowed to lie to your grandmother. I think we can all agree that would be wrong to lie to this adult figure in your life. But this other rule says honor your father and mother. And your mother nudges you and says, tell her that you like it. Your mother is telling you to lie. What do you do in this situation? You have two rules that contradict each other. Rule-based ethics do not give us a way out of solving these contradictions. If the number one rule is follow the rules, and you come to a situation where the rules contradict each other, what are you supposed to do? Rule-based ethics do not give us a way of solving this problem. Unless they go back to this thing where they just invent more rules to cover every possible situation, including rules that tell you which rules to ignore when the rules contradict each other. It just gets very big and complicated. And it's not necessarily a good way to resolve everyday moral conflicts. Another problem with rule-based ethics is that sometimes the rules contradict our own internal sense of right and wrong. So if we rely on our own internal sense of what's right and wrong in the situation with Grandma's birthday sweater, we probably will tell Grandma, thank you so much, I love it, I'll wear it to school, etc., because our own internal sense of right or wrong tells us, don't hurt your grandma's feelings, it's not worth it. And also, don't upset your parents, it's not worth it, right? Tell Grandma what she wants to hear, tell Grandma what your parents want you to tell Grandma, and you'll preserve peace in the family, all will be well with the world. But you broke a rule, which is don't lie. But your internal moral sense tells you it's okay to break that rule in this instance, right? And when the rules contradict our own internal sense of what's right and wrong, then the rules break down as a way to provide us ethical guidelines in difficult ethical situations. Because if the rules are not cohering with your own internal sense of right and wrong, then people are less likely to follow the rules, right? Go back to the previous example of lying to the Nazis. Is lying wrong? According to Kant, lying is always wrong. Lying is a violation of the categorical imperative. When you lie, you are basically endorsing the idea that it's okay for everybody to lie at all times to everyone under all circumstances. The categorical imperative does not take into account circumstances. Rules do not take into account circumstances. Your school may have a dress code that forbids certain type of revealing clothes. Well, what if it's really hot outside? What if the school's air conditioning breaks down? What if I'm a very tall person and I can't find shorts that fit my body and adhere to the dress code? The rules don't make exceptions. But there are also problems with outcome-based ethics, with teleological ethics. First of all, if we're going to base our ethical decisions about what we think the outcome will be, we can't predict the outcome. We can't predict the future. Surely all of you have been in a situation where you tried to do the right thing and it ended up going very, very wrong. Is that your fault? Should we blame you because you didn't get the outcome that you wanted? Well, this is the problem with outcome-based ethics. We can't predict the future. We don't know what the outcome will be. All we can do is hope for the best. Well, people say, here's the answer to that. Why don't we use goals instead of outcomes? Here's what I was trying to do. I know it's not what I achieved, but this is what I was trying to do. And because this was my goal, that's how you should judge my actions. It's based on what I say my goal is. But the problem with that is that we can justify anything as long as we claim to have had a good goal. Goals are internal things. Outcomes are something we can all observe. But goals are just going on in your mind. And so you can say that your goal is anything. You can put a good spin on any situation. You try to paint yourself in the best possible light and make it seem like you had good intentions, even if you did not have good intentions. Another problem with outcome-based ethics is, when do we stop measuring these outcomes? When does this chain of cause and effect stop? Let me give you an example. A friend of yours asks you to help them cheat on a test. You now have a choice. You can either help them cheat on the test or not help them cheat on the test, right? Pretty simple. You might weigh your decision based on what you think the outcome might be. So let's say that you decide to help them cheat on the test because the outcome that you want is for your friend to succeed in this class. You help them cheat on the test. They succeed in the class. And then, because they got an A in this class, and for some reason you ended up with a B, their GPA is higher than yours, and they end up getting the scholarship that you wanted. Do we stop measuring the outcome there? Or do we keep going? They got the scholarship you wanted, but then they go to the college, and the college that you wanted, they have the scholarship that you wanted, they got into the college that you wanted, and it's too much for them. They can't handle it. They drop out. Okay, now can you stop measuring the outcome? Or they drop out, but because they're not in college anymore, now that they have all this free time, they invent some new app that makes them millions of dollars. Now can we stop measuring outcomes? Or maybe once that they've invented this app that got them millions of dollars, they start to live a hedonistic lifestyle and they end up doing too many drugs and drinking too much and their liver gives out and they're dead before age 30. Now can we stop measuring outcomes? This is the problem with outcome-based ethics. There's no way to tell when the chains of cause and effect stop. I mean, you can simplify it. You can say, I helped them cheat on the test. They passed the test. Outcome stops. But remember, passing a test is not an end. It is a means to an end, right? You pass a test to get a good grade in a class. You pass a class to get a good GPA in school. You get a good GPA in school so you can get college money, right? What is the outcome? What is the ultimate goal? It's hard for us to weigh actions based on outcomes when we can't really draw a firm line and say, hey, at this point, we're going to stop measuring outcomes because of this constant chain of cause and effect based on our actions. And this is one of the reasons that John Rawls came up with this system. It's because he wanted to split the difference between deontological ethics and teleological ethics. He wanted to make it so we would have rules to follow, but not blindly. We would follow rules to create the best possible outcome for the most possible people, right? So we are obeying a system of rules that we all together came up with to achieve the fairest possible outcome for the most people. So a few last slides to help you remember all of these key concepts. Aristotle's idea was the golden mean. Kant was a categorical imperative. Mill's was utilitarianism. Rawls was the veil of ignorance. Aristotle focused on the person and the situation. Who are you and what's happening? Kant focused on your actions. What are you doing? Mill focused on the outcome. What happened as a result of your choices? And Rawls focused on both your actions and the outcomes as a result of your actions. So Aristotle asked, who are you? What's happening? Kant asked, what did you do? Mill asked, what was your goal or outcome? But Rawls asked, are the rules that we have agreed on creating the fairest situations for the most people?